How's it going? Welcome to Atomic Life. Today we are here with Ryan Root. What's going on, Ryan?
Hey, how are you, Kurt?
Excellent. So Ryan is an interesting character. He has kind of a long, really cool past in this world of bodybuilding and supplements. Do you want to tell people kind of where
Yeah,
you came from?
yeah, sure. First, Kurt, I want to thank you. It's an honor to talk to you. I have watched a lot of your content, and I think the way, especially you get in depth into a lot of the mechanisms of actions of these compounds, I think is really important. And people are getting education that you just couldn't get when I was coming up into this. So, and I know you've helped me. All right, I've learned things from you, and you're helping thousands and thousands of other people. So I just want to thank you for that first. Yeah. So I guess the story starts for me when I was young. I was always really skinny. I got picked on when I was like around 13 for being so skinny. So that made me hit the weights and never look back. Even so, it took me twice the amount of work to see half the results of my peers. I just did not respond to all this exercise, and therefore, consequently, I didn't have a lot of confidence. Um, uh, you know, I didn't garner a lot of respect. I let people kind of walk on me. A lot of this has to do with that. I now know that I've always had low testosterone, but back then, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when I was that age, they wouldn't even test somebody young for testosterone. The medical community just assumed that if you're under 45, there's no way that you have low testosterone. We don't even want to hear it. We're not going to test you. So therefore, how many younger people in their early 20s suffered low testosterone and nobody ever knew about it because they refused to acknowledge it. So, so eventually I in my early 20s, I took testosterone. I took a really small cycle. I was just doing 1 milliliter of Sustanon a week and about 10 milligrams of D-ball a day. Well, I hyper responded. I put on 32 pounds and about 100 pounds on my bench in 5 weeks. It was like just an incredible transformation. Suddenly people were treating me with respect. Suddenly people wanted to be my friend now. When I'd walk into a bar, the crowd would part out of my way. When I'd walk into a room, everybody's kind of head would turn. I had never experienced that before. So, and again, with my fast transformation, I experienced it like that. And it was just a different world, right? Not only did I have energy and confidence now, everything improved, but it was also that aspect of it, of being able to the dopaminergic reaction you get from people, telling you look good, or even, you see people doing a double take, things like that. It just changed my life. It changed my world. I lived 2 different lives, one before testosterone, one after testosterone. And the one after testosterone, I dramatically preferred. So at the time I was in college for biochemistry, and I needed to figure out, why am I feeling this way? Why is this doing this? Like, I didn't understand how something could so dramatically improve my quality of life. So I started tailoring my degree to the study of hormones. I read voraciously. I read everything I did. I consumed every bit of content I could. And again, the kind of content today did not exist back then.
Yeah, what was there? Just Llewellyn, maybe?
Llewellyn's one of his early books, and just like kind of anecdotal things from the internet.
Dan Duquesne's Steroid Underground handbook was out.
I'm trying to remember.
It was out, but it was just super expensive at that point.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But what year are you talking about now?
This probably was, I guess it was just right around 2000, maybe just before that, or into just after that, early 2000s. But yeah, but I just, consumed as much as I could, and I started to learn about it. So then now people, saw the way that I had improved. So they came to me to ask me to do the same thing for them. So I started, just helping people, and it started off helping people. And then, again, the respect and admiration, appreciation I would get from helping people feel as good as I did, that gives you a dose response, right? Dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, endorphins, and that in itself is addicting. Like, we're supposed to be addicted to helping people, right? We evolved those mechanisms. So, just being able to help people, and now I'm starting to kind of get a little name for helping people in my small city, and everybody knew that, you want help with these compounds, you just go to Ryan. So eventually I decided, well, I have to learn how to monetize this. Because I'm starting to spend more and more time. So I started nailing down supply chains. Starting to figure out, where to get best quality, and and the prices got better and better. So one day, one of my customers told me about this online forum, Source Forum, and he said that, these guys are doing the same thing. You should look at that. They're doing the same thing you can, and you can compete with their prices. So, I had never thought about it before. So I went onto this forum he mentioned, and I looked at it, and I started to think over time, like, I can do this. Like, I can compete with these prices. At the time I'm sorry?
You were brewing already at this point.
No, I wasn't brewing yet.
Oh,
not at this point. At this time, I was actually just reselling products.
Okay.
Yeah. So at the time I kind of lucked into a great source, like a phenomenal source out of China. That was the IP China source. And this will make you laugh. Like, when IP China first started, they became popular because they had really low priced gear, and they had everything. They were a one-stop shop. They had everything you could want. And they were really low priced.
Was it raw stuff, or was it bottled? Was it raw or was it bottled?
No, it was manufactured. It was made. But
Cool.
But this will make you laugh. So when we first started using them, early 2000s, this was, they had some name brand stuff, but for a lot cheaper price, they had the stuff that they manufactured. They would manufacture it, and they didn't have a process to bottle it like we do now, right? So they would just put it in test tubes with a cork on the top. So we were doing Sustanon out of these test tubes where you just pop the cork off and then draw it up and inject it and put the cork back on. And that was this company. Well, but it was so cheap. Like, they were selling it so cheap. And so this company just started blowing up, and they were sending all over the world. Like, this company, IP China, was probably one of the biggest dealers in the world. They sold to other dealers, right? Like, and eventually I'd worked with them for so long, I learned how to get the cost down. Like, I just kind of kept talking them down. I was a long time, long-time customer of theirs. So, and then in 2008, British Drag. So let me explain the zeitgeist at the time. The way the community worked is that you could only buy name brand. People would only wanted to buy name brand because they were concerned about fakes. Like, prior to the emergence of the UGL, like, fakes were a big thing. Now the younger guys won't know that because they don't know how hard it used to be to get testosterone and all this gear. It's so easy now, but there was a time when it was really hard to get, and it was expensive, and therefore a fakes market ran rampant. Now there's really no such thing as fakes because it doesn't even make sense anymore. It's so cheap to actually make real testosterone. It doesn't even make sense to make a fake.
So people might not know. So British Dragon, what you referred to at the time, was the largest underground lab. It was like the first true underground lab that really got large.
Yeah. So, and they were one of the name brands that people trusted. So it was like, some of them at the time were Denkel. We talked about Organon. The Organon Sustanon was really big. Denkel, Quality Vet out of Mexico. That was a big name. Was it Tatakio? Those were some of them, but there was only like 5 or 6 really well trusted brands, and British Dragon was probably one of the best ones. I think they had those original pink tie D balls, right? Wasn't that was British? Oh, or that was British Dispensary.
Yeah, that's different.
Okay, British Dispensary. Right? They had those pink tie D balls in the Anadrol, right? The green octagon Anadrol or hexagon.
Yep.
Yeah,
correct.
Okay, so British Dispensary was another big name. But in 2008, British Dragon went down, and IP China just started slapping British Dragon labels on their products and selling it. So, and a lot of people knew, knew that it wasn't the real British Dragon, but it was still good quality products. And so nobody cared. So, again, I couldn't, had I manufactured something at the time, like nobody would have accepted a brand that they didn't know, a name that they didn't know. So I had to resell. So I just resold this British Dragon. I was getting it at an incredibly low price. So I could compete with anybody else in the market. So I went to this market with the idea of, and I had really, done my market research on other resellers. And the idea was I was just going to bring good, simple business practices to the business. When I started this, I hoped that I could make, because at the time I didn't make a lot of money. I worked at an emergency room, but I didn't make much money. And my steroid side business, I lived in a small city, so it wasn't very lucrative. I was living paycheck to paycheck. I couldn't even afford to go out to eat. What I was hoping for is to make $200 or $300 extra a week. I said, if I could do that, I'll be comfortable, and that will be great. But I thought that was overzealous. I didn't think that was possible. So when I started this whole thing, I opened my online business, and it just blew up. Like it absolutely blew up. Like I would never dream that it would. Within 6 months, I was bringing about $30,000 a week. It quickly got, to the point where I couldn't handle it myself, and I had to expand. There was a point when, now again, I had never seen a lot of money. There was a point when I had $100,000 in my hands at cash at my house, and I got terrified. I was scared. I thought I almost quit at that point. I was like, I got to stop this. I'm going to get caught. This is too much, but at the time, what really drove me, like, in my book, I try to go on about the mentality or the psyche of someone who runs an operation like this. And this would probably be with any drug dealer really who starts an empire. And a lot of people just try to label this as greed, right? Is like you started this empire, you couldn't stop because of the money, and you just got greedy, and they wrap it up in this neat little box of you're greedy, and then they throw it out. There's the explanation. It's simple, but it's not that simple. It's not greed. Greed isn't what drives you on. I had, at the time, I had, I don't know, a few thousand clients, and I would get emails every day of people thanking me for making them a better husband to their wife, a better father to their children, and a better supporter of their family. Right. And me thinking like I remember saying, oh my God, when I had all that money, and I'm like, I'm going to get caught. I got to stop this. I even had a plan. I was going to tell all my current clients, I was going to fill all the orders that I'd taken the money for. Then I was going to say, okay, I can't do this anymore. This is it. I'm quitting. When I thought of going to all those clients and telling them, these people who, a lot of them depend on me. I was the cheapest at the time, because that was one of my market strategies, was to come in and undercut the rest of the market. I was cheap at that time. I was, reliable, and I got my products to everybody, really, really quick, and people just trusted me. And I was giving advice to a lot of people who would ask for it, and they were really appreciating the coaching. When I thought of going to those 2,000 people and saying, I can't do this anymore, I can't help you anymore, I can't continue dramatically improving your quality of life because I have a little bit of anxiety right now, that's what changed. And then, I suddenly said, fuck this, I can do this. So I just put my head down, expanded, started to hire people around me because I couldn't do it by myself. It was just getting too big. I hired people, put the right people in place, and just kept driving forward. Pretty soon we started doing 50,000 a week, and towards the end, we were doing like 100,000 a week. It just got crazy. It got crazy.
I was just going to back up for a second so people listening are aware. So anything they see with British Dragon on it now is not real. British Dragon was founded in 1999 in Thailand and went out of business in 2008. So you took over kind of as they were phasing out, right? One of the owners, I think, committed suicide.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Yeah.
But they're a defunct brand. So if you see things with British Dragon on, it's junk. or it's
Yeah,
not junk food.
or
It's
at least
real, it's not
somebody
real British Dragon. It's some underground lab, but it's not
they're
actually
reusing
British
that label. Yeah,
Dragon.
right.
Yeah.
Like I said, and IP China was doing that. They were just slapping British Dragon labels. Like as far as I knew, they were the first ones to do that. It's like it was actually brilliant because the guy, everybody knows British Dragon, and he had quality products anyways. And like I said, there was a lot of people who knew British Dragon went defunct and knew that IP China was just slapping British Dragon labels on, but it was still good, so nobody cared.
Yeah.
But oh yeah, so let me get to how I made my own. All right, so this source would get flaky sometimes, right? I mean, he was big. He was selling all over the world. But he would get flaky sometimes. And, I was ordering, I know I was one of his best clients, like ordering the largest quantities. And he would get flaky sometimes. Sometimes he'd just disappear for a month or say, oh, something happened. We can't do anything for a month. And I started to, obviously I had all my eggs in one basket, right? And if something happened to him, I was done. So I knew I needed to do something. I needed to create a robust system, right? I needed to have contingencies. I needed to have redundancies in place. So that if something happened to this source, that everything would just have to end right there. So I started looking at other brands, but all of them were expensive and I'd have to raise my price. And one of my things was undercutting the rest of the market. I wasn't going to be able to do that with another brand. So at the time I had never made anything before. By now I started making, 100,000. And now I've made 100,000 or more vials of different things. But at the time I hadn't, but I did know a guy who made his own stuff. And he was selling it around town just locally. I lived in a small city and all the dealers, we all knew each other and we were all amicable. So I went, and also at the time when I started to make my operation, I knew that the local game was what was going to get me in trouble, because if the local cops got wind of what we're doing, they could come bust our operation. So I actually stopped selling locally. And I also made sure everybody in my operation knew how important it was to keep their mouth quiet about what we're doing, because that was going to get us caught. The national stuff was anonymous, right? The local game, people could put a face and a name to the products, but nationally it was completely anonymous. So we quit locally, only we're doing nationally. So nobody knew what we were doing. So I took it to this other dealer and I just kind of showed him what I was doing. And I still remember his face when he started to see how much money we were making and what I was offering him. I was offering him, said, okay, so if you can make this, he was selling stuff locally, but just in a glass vial, and he didn't know how to do a label or anything like that. So, and I could professionalize his operation a little bit. And so I took this to him and I said, you can make these in a mass amount, and I'll pay you X amount per vial. And, you can start making more money than you've ever seen in your entire life. And of course he bit. And that's when we started the new brand called Matrix Lab Steroids. And you can still Google Matrix Lab Steroids today and all the good reviews. So, we did some things. I made it a little strong on purpose because I just wanted to get a good name. One of the big things that it did is that when I was reselling British Dragon, I think my profit margin was 400%. When we made it ourselves, we could make it so much cheaper. I could make I only made 20 milliliter vials because for us guys who were kind of, who were experienced, 10 milliliter vials just weren't anything. And they'd last a week and a half or maybe 2 weeks at most. So I would only sell 20 milliliter vials. And, that was one way I was unique, and good quality products. So now my profit margin became 1,000%.
Okay.
So we were made. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to, so people understand that you weren't synthesizing the chemicals, right? So the raws are purchased.
Yeah.
The raws are made somewhere else. Just so people watching understand what goes on. So the raws are purchased. And then what are you using? Benzoic acid, benzyl benzoate, some sort of carrier oil, bottle cap label. Yeah. Yeah, that's correct. Oleate.
Yeah, that's what a UGL is right? Sometimes we use that.
But people might picture like as if it were some sort of lab in the sense that the chemicals are being synthesized there. They're not. They're purchased already
That's correct.
as a raw in a powder form,
In
generally.
the powder
depending on
form,
what it
yeah.
is,
And
right?
then, you know, there's a
ball is,
yeah,
powder.
yeah, that's right. And you know, there's a process to turn it into usable form, injectable usable form, right? But it's kind of like a recipe, and once you learn it, it's not difficult. So, but you know, at the time, like none of this was known. Like at the time, I couldn't go on the internet and look how do I make steroid from raws. Now you can. Now it's everywhere.
Can you really?
You can go. People have videos that show you how to do it. But then none of this existed. So it kind of came from. I knew this guy who had done it a lot himself. He taught himself how to do it, and he had done a lot himself. He was really good at it, and I learned from him. And then after doing it myself, him and I started doing it together, and we came up with new formulations and new ways to do things, and it was a really good system. So one of the reasons that I blew up so big is, again, you have to look. It's what's important to understand is the context of the time. This was like the emergence of the UGL. I certainly wasn't the first one, but we were right in the beginning of the UGLs being accepted. So when I had this British Dragon product, and I was very popular reselling that product, I thought that when I introduced this new matrix label, that it wasn't going to do well, because again, it's not a lab that anybody knows. I thought it was going to take a long time for people to warm up, but I sold it a little cheaper because it was cheaper to make. And I thought it wasn't going to do well. It was going to take a while. I knew the stuff was good because all of our buddies used it, and it was phenomenal. But it turned out that people turned to it right away, immediately. Like, people stopped buying the BD and they all bought the Matrix. And what I learned is that I was the brand, right? Like, people trusted me because, you know, I gave them good service, and whatever I put on there, they would buy. And so it turned out that I was the brand. And so now people are getting this cheaper stuff. It's actually more potent than the British Dragon stuff was, because I made it that way. Mm-hmm. And then this stuff starts running through all the forums. We're talking about it. Started running through the pro circuit. Like, this thing just blew up like almost overnight. Yeah, I'm trying to. So what, you know, besides that, what made it blow up? Like, you know, what were the intricate details? At the time, again, it's important to understand the context of the time. They were shipping snail mail. All the other sources were shipping snail mail, right? Nobody, you know, steroid dealers are not masters of business administration, so they didn't come in there with an eye on entrepreneurial, like, how do I make this business better? It was just, you know, the customer service was bad. They were shipping snail mail, and, you know, that's like, some of them didn't care as much about quality because, you know, they're more interested in a dollar than maintaining a brand name. They didn't understand what a brand name was. So when I came in there with quality products, I made sure I made everything right. I had free shipping, and I upgraded it to priority, which means everybody got their products in 2 or 3 days, which, again, it was taking 2 weeks from everybody else. And good customer service. So another thing that happens when you have a popular steroid dealer, or anybody who's popular, you get these sycophants who kind of, you know, praise your name and kind of lavish you with praise because you have what they want, what they need. And this can cause a dose response that makes people manic. So I would see on the boards all these other sources who had a lot of people counting on them. If anyone questioned them or what they were doing, they would actually become dicks, and they would treat their customers terribly. And I saw this happening, and I vowed never to do that. So it was about good customer service. It was about fast shipping, which nobody else was doing, and again, quality products and I undercut the rest of the market. And this all just kind of came together and just allowed me to rise right to the top, like, really quickly. At one point, I was rated the third largest dealer in the world, even though I only sold the United States. I didn't sell outside the world.
Who rates this kind of stuff?
And so this was just a rated on the online forums. Yeah.
Okay. So based on what sells, whatever. I think when you talked about the quality too, I think that's interesting too, because I think there's an assumption out there that underground labs would produce junk, I guess it's not always the case, because if someone's name, like your name,
Yeah.
is behind the label, you take your stuff very seriously, right? It's your reputation.
Yeah.
So,
And
it
and so
doesn't
and
mean you're
another thing, like the cops love this term. Like when I got arrested, the prosecution loved this term as the bathtub gear, right? This bathtub. I never knew anybody to go near a bathtub when they're making this stuff.
no,
Like it's not expensive to get a mobile hood, to get beakers and everything in a hood, so everything's being a
using
relatively
electric
sterile
range.
environment. It's not expensive to get all those things, and I had those for all my labs, and I had like at one time I had like 5 labs throughout the country. So and you're right. It's I mean, good business practices where say it's not good to you don't want to harm your clients. So we did everything we could to make sure sterility and quality, and any of the good, like, so nowadays, the way it works with the online forums, if you're an emerging lab, if you have bad products, right, or if you scam people or whatever, you will be weeded out. Like the bodybuilding community, or the people who use these, are some of the most loyal people, but they can also be be very anxiety ridden, and they'll if you wrong them, they'll berate you more than anybody. So they'll get right online and start talking about any bad products that they had, or bad service. So if you have something bad, you will get weeded out, because everybody all over the boards will be talking about how bad your product is. And it's like you live or die by that, about what people say. And that's another thing that really helped me, is managing the talk. So I had to spend a lot of time, like, if somebody had a problem, I would always say, come to me, I'll fix it. And I made sure I fixed problems. If somebody went on a board and with a problem that didn't come to me first, like, I would just go make sure I talked to the person. Okay, listen, I'm going to fix your problem. Can you go fix what you said online? Those those responses that from the customers, you live and die by those. So
Were you on the boards? So you were
yeah,
fielding questions?
yeah. As BD supplements, like
I didn't think it was your name, but
yeah, well, the original name of my company was BD Supplements, because I resold British Dragon, but the brand testosterone, of gear that I made was the Matrix Labs. But yeah, I was on the boards, like, actually talking to people.
wow.
But yeah, you'll get weeded out. So, like, you're right, and there's a lot of talk about how, it's this gear made in bathtubs. And there was an early documentary that didn't help either. I'm trying to remember what the name of it was, but there was an early documentary about, I'm trying to remember what it was, about the making of gear. And it actually showed a guy, he had a mask on, right? And he was making it over his dirty kitchen.
Oh, come on.
On a pot with water, right? So it was only getting up to 212, right? Because it's boiling water. I don't know why you would do that. And he was just making it there in a mason jar. And then he would, like, and this was one of the early documentaries. I don't know if, like, a lot of people probably saw that. I can't remember what it was, but it was a terrible look at a UGL, or somebody who makes their own steroids, right? Like, that's not what we actually do. And of course, that made it really look bad. So, I mean, I don't know if that had something to do with the early perception that it's just made in a dirty environment. But any of the guys near the top, if you have guys with thousands of reviews near the, that's rated the top across the boards, they're there for a reason. They have quality gear. They have good things. There's no way you could make it that high if you had bad gear, or if you had bad customer service, or if you scammed people in any kind of way.
People get sick and it's over.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So then obviously this came to an abrupt end, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess I know the event that caused the eventual end. So I guess I can go there. I had moved to the greater New York City area. I actually lived in the Jersey side, right on the Hudson. Mm-hmm. And I moved to a penthouse there. And the day I moved in, the day after I moved in, I woke up in the morning enjoying the new environment. Everything was great. And I get a call from one of my shippers. A package a package leaked and the post office says they're going to open it. So now I have to explain how the operation worked in the sense of why this was so bad. So what I developed is I knew I had to develop a way, to keep this safe, right? I had to develop a way to make this as safe as possible. And one of the ways I did that is by giving everybody a job, right? Everybody had a job to complete the whole iteration. So I had shippers, I had chemists, and I had like money collectors, right? And then later I had receivers. I had receivers too, receiving houses that received just the raw products, and then they'd bring it to a chemist. But I got all these people, and nobody was to know anybody else in the operation. Right? So if one of them got busted, they couldn't blow in the whole operation. The second thing I did is move it nationally, right? So a lot of these people were in different states. Chemists were in different states. Shippers were in different states. This way, it has any state-run any state-run investigation will, they'll stop at that state, and then they won't have any jurisdiction to go outside that state. So the way I got caught federally was the only way I was going to be able to get caught, because we were too spread out for it to be a state operation. So this whole, and essentially what I did is I managed the customers and kind of pulled the strings and put everything together. One time, so what I did is I would have chemists make it in one state, and then they would bubble wrap it, tape it really, really secure, put it in a package. And I would usually have like 300 vials or so, 300 of the 20 milliliter vials in a package. And then they would ship it to a shipper. And then the shipper would fill all the orders from there. And that's kind of how we're doing it. And that's how we're keeping it compartmentalized in different states, the operation in different states. Right. So one of my shippers was a personal assistant, and she started, because she was a personal assistant, she was dealing with a lot of close to me. So she started to be able to connect some dots and understand a lot of the people in my operation. She wanted to move to a shipper because the shippers got paid a lot more money than she did as a personal assistant. So I gave her that opportunity, let her be a shipper. Well, when this happened, the mistake I made is I had the chemist send this big, he sent 3 boxes of 300 vials, 3 different boxes right to her house. So where she already had kind of the shipping operation going. So when the DEA saw it's leaking, they actually called her, or not the DEA, the post office, the federal inspector at the post office they actually called her and told them, this is leaking. We have to open it to make sure it's nothing hazardous. Right?
Yeah. And it's against the law to ship liquid, right? That's why they were allowed to do this.
Yeah. And I guess they're
not supposed to ship anything liquid.
Right. And they're allowed to open to make sure it's not hazardous. Right. Yeah. So we had word that it was being opened. So we actually started to clean the place out. But obviously, once they opened it, pretty soon they sent the DEA to the house, and the DEA got there, and there was still some products there. Not a lot though. Well, anyways, they ended up scaring the shit out of her. Actually, there's 2 people there because somebody else was there helping her. And the other person, he just shut up and said, no, I'm going to get a lawyer. I don't know anything that's going on here. So I bought him a lawyer, but they scared her, telling her all this nonsense. And then she blew the whole operation in because she knew more than anybody else did. So that's how it first started. So once I had a lawyer for him, and he was talking to the local police. And after a while, it appeared that the feds were not going to pick this up. It wasn't quite big enough for the feds to pick them up, or what they seized was not quite big enough. So it was going to stay the state operation. 2 people got felonies, which low-level felonies. Nobody spent a day in jail. And that was it. It was just going to end there. So the rest of my crew, even one of the guys who who was there and got caught said, let's keep going. Come on, we'll just stay out of New York. It's localized in New York. We had the operation running another place. He actually moved out of New York, and he was the guy who moved to Nevada. And then we just kept going. So it turns out that the feds did pick it up at that point, but it took them a while to pick it up, but they did through this Operation Cyber Juice. So they put together a special operation to actually seek out internet steroid suppliers called Operation Cyber Juice. And that's what I got caught up in. I think they busted, can't remember how many now, something like 15 labs or something like that. But so that's how I eventually got caught. But again, it took them like 2.5 more years after that to actually catch us. And
had you stopped initially, you think you would have gotten, or they were already building a case?
That's a great question. They had evidence, but they didn't have even when they finally come indicted us, because I looked at when I got into prison, I actually ended up appealing my case because they added something that shouldn't have been added, and I actually got 2 more years than I should have. But I really started breaking down my case, and I learned a lot about the law. I actually taught myself everything about the law. Spent almost the whole 4 years like just piling through cases in the law. And I also started helping other people, because now that I learned my case and how to do it and exactly what was going on, I was able to help other people. So I became what was called the jailhouse lawyer. That's just somebody who just takes an interest in the law and then just starts helping everybody. So I helped hundreds of people file motions and help defend cases and file habeas corpus petitions.
What was your actual sentence at the time?
78 months, which is 6.5 years. I did some programs, and with good time, I did a little over 4 years.
Okay.
But my sentence was 78 months, 6.5 years. Anyways, what was I thinking? Oh, yeah. Your question was, do I think we would have got caught? Well, again, even when they finally did indict, they didn't have a ton of evidence. And the one thing they had that kept giving them an understanding of the operation was they were able to decipher our web of burner phones through text messages, right? So they were getting all the text messages. When we changed phones, they were able to figure out what phone we went to, and they put together all the text messages, which gave them information. But again, they didn't have any information because it was all anonymous. They didn't have any information that could directly link it to a person, right? They just, what they did have, when you have a conspiracy charges, they don't need much information. When they had 9 guys, or 9, because there's a total of 10 people indicted in my case. So I had 9 co-defendants. When they would ask those 9 people, was Ryan Root the leader of your operation? And all of them said, yes, that's all they need. They don't need anything else.
Wow.
So, I, in that sense, understanding that and knowing how the feds work, if you start causing a problem and saying you're going to defend your case, they'll start to weaponize your family and your friends. And, instead of having all that happen to keep everybody safe, I just pled guilty right away.
Stinks. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, again, it did suck. It was bad, but it also is a part of, I'm one of those guys who says that if I could go back and take it back, I don't think I would change anything, because it made me the person I am today. And a lot of those experiences, like don't get me wrong, prison sucks. It's terrible. It's
I wasn't even going to ask.
Yeah, it's terrible. But in the same right, like, it gave me the opportunity. Like, one of the things I did, I wanted to use that time wisely. So I read voraciously. I really started to understand even more than I did about business and I read a lot of biographies of some of our greatest entrepreneurs, which were all fascinating. And I wrote the business plan for what I do now, my hormone clinic. I wouldn't have been able to learn that much and do it if I didn't actually have the time to sit there and actually research and do all this stuff. We are a product of our experiences. So, and I think you know, in some sense, I think it helped me become the better man that I am today. So I don't know. Again, it's not like,
You
oh, it
can't
was
do
okay,
it,
and
so
I think everybody should go to prison. That's, I mean,
no. But
nothing like
yeah,
that. Making the
sometimes
best out of a
opportunities
bad
come to it.
situation.
So yeah, I mean, you made the best out of it. How did you get into they allowed you to come out and get involved in a hormone clinic? There was no stipulation about
Yeah.
that?
So yeah. So the way it works, the way most of these, at least the telemedicine clinics work, is you have what's called a management services organization, right? And that's what I own, which manages all of the administrative functions of a medical clinic, and mine specifically for TRT and HRT. And then we partner with a medical clinic that is owned by a provider. The provider, and now we have a management services agreement that defines and stipulates the exact functions of the partnership. The medical clinic is, takes care of all of the clinical functions, like, the prescribing. That, they're responsible for all that. We're responsible for all the management, right? But in the management, I can still consult and give people my opinion. The final say is up to the provider, right? So now I never touch a product because it comes right from the pharmacy to the
Mhm.
client, to the patient. I never have my hands on any products. I could never do anything illegal if I wanted to, because the final say is up to the provider. So in that sense, I just own a management company, and I'm partnered with a medical clinic,
Got
and
it.
there's nothing against the rules about that.
Got
But
it. So
again, I'm allowed to, because of all the empirical data I've aggregated over the decades, that more than any, again, we can go into this about why the medical community just doesn't understand. They're ignorant to these hormones. But because I've aggregated more empirical data than any physician could have, or any endocrinologist, urologist could have, unless they had my history, um, you know, like, I understand them much better than
Yep.
almost anybody else in the country, present clearly excluded. But
Well, different. I think we have a different knowledge base with that stuff, but you and I are probably pretty similar
yeah,
in what we know.
um,
You want to talk?
like,
We
I'm
can
a,
talk about that if you want. We
yeah,
can talk about why the medical community. I mean, it's not taught in medical school.
yeah,
Endocrinology is not
yeah,
considered a primary field of study.
yeah. So I've had a long time to dissect this, and I've spent a lot of time trying to understand why. So I have a good pulse on it, just because, to a lot of people it doesn't make sense. Like they think you go to your doctor, ask your doctor about all your
Mhm.
medications, and it's just so again, due to the path of demonization that testosterone took since the 1980s, right? Like, it became banned by the Olympic Committee. It became banned in all professional sports. It became a controlled substance in the 1990 Steroid Control Act. So this kind of clouded it in this shroud of odium, right? So I had the stigma attached to it. Because it was a controlled substance, it made it difficult, if not impossible, for anybody to research, right? So, and again, the stigma just led the medical community to eschew these compounds. And so, just like you said, they do not learn about it in medical school, even endocrinologists, and which is kind of insidious, because you think that you go to your hormone doctor to understand your hormones, and they don't study these hormones. They study primarily insulin. So
Thyroid and diabetes.
yeah, and so you don't understand. They don't understand these hormones.
Nope. And it's and you talk about the research thing too. So the research really was big up until the late 70s and early 80s. And then
Yeah,
when the FDA pulled all
yeah,
the licensing off half these products, it stopped for a long time until Bazin was an endocrinologist that started researching testosterone in the late 90s and early 2000s. And really, it's actually defined as an error. So that was considered the pre-Bazin era, and we're in the post-Bazin era now. Before him, most doctors didn't even understand testosterone grew muscle. He had actually proved
there
it to the
is.
medical community that it grew muscle. They'd
It's
never
funny you said
seen
it.
any bodybuilder ever. They'd never seen pumping iron. They'd never seen Arnold Schwarzenegger. They were completely clueless. So you were doing this at the same time that a scientist actually had to show doctors that these drugs grew muscle.
Yeah, that is hysterical, because I have seen a study that came out of that era that the conclusion of the study was there's no evidence that testosterone builds muscle. I was it's and you get studies that are off, like, people think, oh, this is a study. They're wrong all the time. And or the other big mistake I see people make is that they try to translate mouse studies or other mammal studies to human studies, which sometimes it does translate, but a lot of times it doesn't.
Yeah. Well, we see with the Hirschberg assays, which is where the anabolic and androgenic rating come from, it's mostly done in rats and roosters, and they don't translate it all to humans.
Yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a perfect example of how that it's, I guess they're not ethically allowed to experiment initially on humans, so they have to use something, but
Yeah.
doesn't.
And a lot of it has to do with these laws and regulations. Like they made it too difficult to study on humans, so therefore they're ignorant about it. And it takes. That's why I've said before that the bodybuilding community is light years ahead of the medical community when it comes to understanding compounds, and especially the derivatives. Like is the fact that primobolan is or methanolone is not is not used in any pharmacy is proof that they don't understand. It's one of them, if you want to talk about, I hate to use the word safe because testosterone is not dangerous.
No,
right?
Every aspirin has risks.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
More people die of liver failure from Tylenol than any other thing, including alcohol.
Yes, that is correct.
So, any child can buy Tylenol.
Yeah. Yeah.
There was a study done recently with primobolan where they actually discovered that they discovered 7 new metabolites of primobolan, and one of them acts as an anti-estrogen. So we've all kind of known this for a long time, but this was just done on primobolan acetate, and you'll get a kick out of this because primobolan is not FDA approved and is not made in the United States. The lab that they bought the primobolan acetate from in order to conduct this study was probably the same lab that you were buying your raws from, because there's only so many factories in the world that buy it. So when people say things like the underground lab stuff is junk, meanwhile, the same stuff that the pharmaceutical companies are using for these studies is purchased.
Yeah.
It's purchased from the same place.
Talk about irony. Huh? Yeah. That's really funny. But yeah, I mean, it's, if you want to talk about a compound that has a lower side effect profile than anything else, I mean, we're talking about primobolan. If you're worried about the possible side effects of testosterone, then primobolan is the answer. Right? It's like,
well, if it would aromatize, if there was a source of estrogen with it, it would be the safest, right? Testosterone technically would be, because it does aromatize, but primobolan outside of that would technically have a better safety profile. Only one person that I'm aware of ever died from primobolan, and it was from acetate, and they already had they were already in liver failure, and their doctor gave them primobolan acetate to help with liver failure, and they ended up dying. So they were already dying anyway. It was one case study. But how many drugs can you name that are on the market now that only cause one death? It's been out since 1961.
Yeah.
Right. It was identified, I think, in 59 or 60, and it came to market in 60 or 61.
Yeah.
As Nibble and Nibble Depot.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. So it's evidence right there of the, like, I don't even know if it's, I don't know, a combination of things, ignorance and the stigma that's put on these compounds. The fact that it's just not available in the United States, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
But isn't acetate absorbs through your lymphatic system, doesn't it? So it doesn't even go through your liver?
Well, it does slightly, because there's a methyl group on carbon 1. So it's still going to, it does. So you'll notice even with primobolan and xanthate, when it's injected, it'll still raise ALT to some slight degree, because there's still a little bit of liver stress. But again, it's not any liver stress that you'd be concerned with. One beer would probably be the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's protected from hepatic breakdown to that extent. But yes, it enters the lymphatic system.
Yeah.
And so you lose acetate, you probably lose 50% of the API in digestion, versus an xanthate is going, you should in theory get, 99% of it would be available.
Bring us back around to, I would always say that we take medical students and we put in this machine that spits out for providers at the other end, right? And in this machine, like, some of the people who specialize are gonna go through specialist education, but none of this education, none of this, when you put them through this machine, none of it in the curriculum, in the paradigm, has anything about testosterone, or and I treat a lot of physicians. When I did this illegally, a lot of my clients were physicians, and they admit that when they go through medical school, they don't learn about this. This just isn't a part of their
No.
curriculum. They learn, they spend like, they said in their medical books, there's like a paragraph on it.
Yep. And when you talk, and I told you, when you talk to the scientists that are in the labs that are making these chemicals,
yeah,
I'm not going to name any of the companies, but the scientists that are actually currently synthesizing these things aren't even really aware of what they do or what their actual original use for us. Like Trenbolone, for instance, most of the guys that are synthesizing that for the current company that owns the rights to it are not even aware that it was a human grade drug first.
Yeah.
Right. As far as they know, it was a cattle pellet all along.
Yeah. It's really funny. Like I remember the early days of the Trenbolone when people were making it from these pellets.
Yeah. Dan Duquesne was the one who basically made that public.
Yeah. Yeah. So you had all these backwoods guys like now able to make Trenbolone, and it, like, for a while when that happened, you could buy the pellets legally because it was for cattle.
Yeah.
And that was more attainable than testosterone. So you had all these guys just doing tren acetate, which is not good. But you had a ton of these gym bros just doing tren acetate during that period. It was really funny.
The funniest stuff from back then was guys would, so it was available. The original Revlar was available as it wasn't even Revlar back then.
No,
I can't remember the name. It was, I forget the name of it.
Finaplex, right?
It was Finaplex. The original Finaplex was available in two forms. It was available in heifer and steer.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of guys not understanding science would say, well, I'm a man, so I'm going to get the one for the steer. And meanwhile, the steer had estrogen in it. Right. Had 29 estradiol in it. So they would cook this and then they would get it and they would get gyno. And then there was this rumor that went around that Trenbolone had some sort of estrogenic potential, which it clearly doesn't. It doesn't have a progesterone. Yeah. That's another myth as well. It's an antagonist to the progesterone receptor. It doesn't actually cause any activation there. And it's less than 1%. I don't know where on the internet you'll see things saying that Trenbolone's, one of its metabolites, 17 beta. Trenbolone has some sort of 40% affinity to the progesterone receptor. It, as an antagonist, not an agonist, it's not causing anything. You never see progesterone like or estrogen like side effects in farm animals when they're given tren.
Yeah.
But it just shows that like people take data from studies that are done on animals and they try to translate them to humans and they cherry pick the wrong stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
And I was going to say, before you talk about the stigma, there was a study done years ago with doctors in the US, and they were asking them their opinions on certain situations that they would encounter with patients. And when they were asked about steroids, how they felt about a patient coming to see them on steroids. So like if when you were on testosterone, if you went to go see your doctor, how he felt about treating you while knowing that you were on steroids. And most doctors in the United States said they felt less favorably about steroids than they did about cocaine use. So you were looked upon as someone that was doing street drugs. You were worse than the guy doing street drugs. You were somewhere around heroin at that point. So this is the medical community. This is their view on things with testosterone. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has testosterone listed as one of the 100 most valuable drugs. I don't believe heroin's on that list.
Yeah. It really is crazy the way things can become stigmatized. Shit. I just had a thought. I had a thought and I just lost it.
Stigmatized.
Yeah. I can't remember. It's gonna have to come back. Yeah, it's gonna have to come back. But yeah, oh yeah, this was it. Okay. So like I always say that it takes a similar path to marijuana. I don't know. I mean, obviously you weren't alive back then, but from the education that I've seen that was given in the 50s about marijuana, like when during the time of called reefer madness, right? You were actually educated that you could die from marijuana, that if you smoked it, you would go crazy. And it is one of the most dangerous drugs, which is why it eventually became a Schedule I drug. Now marijuana, like testosterone is Schedule 3, right? Cocaine Schedule 2. These are all whether they have medical merit or not. So Schedule 1 has no medical value at all, and you can't even research it. This is the problem why, like for instance, MDMA is Schedule 1 and nobody could research it. Well, they actually just recently, not too long ago, maybe last year or something, passed a regulation to allow people to obtain MDMA for research because it's really helping people with PTSD, right? It's really helpful in using using proper dosing to get people to actually open up and talk about their problems, right? So marijuana, because of this stigma, was thrown into Schedule 1, which means it had no medical value, and which just shows you like just how wrong they got this. So from reefer madness, it took about 6 decades for people to finally say, you know what, marijuana is not that dangerous. In fact, it helps a lot of people and it does have medical value. So then you had, the fundamental right, and this is some of the stuff when I studied the law so voraciously, like the fundamental right it's a fundamental right of the state to be able to control substances. It's not a right of the federal government. So we have dual sovereignty, right? And the federal government is not supposed to decide on things like that. It's up to the state. So the federal government is out of lines by controlling any substance anyway. But you could see states just started ignoring the federal statute. It's still a Schedule 1 controlled substance. Technically, the federal government could come in and raid any of these cannabis operations that are happening throughout the states. Smartly, they choose not to because it just doesn't make any sense. And the federal government is on their way to deschedule marijuana, but it's following a similar path to testosterone is following a similar path to marijuana. It's just behind it, right? So it's starting to become more and more understood how beneficial it is. Even the time I went to prison, when I went into prison, the conversation wasn't normalized about this compound. Like the general level of education was much worse, but people like yourself, people like some of these influencers that come out and just talk about it freely and normalize the conversation has increased the general education on testosterone. And I was happy to see that when I got out, that the average person is they have more resources now. We didn't have this when we were coming up. We didn't have this channel. We didn't have Paul's channel. We didn't have a lot of these, these resources. And the general education was just terrible. Like nobody knew anything. So I can see testosterone moving towards being descheduled and deregulated. It's just a long, slow process like it was for marijuana. And I think it will happen. It's just behind marijuana in that process. One of the things I want to do with my company, and is, when I get a big enough audience and when my company gets large enough, is lead a charge towards descheduling. I was
going to say that's something that I would like to do at some point in my career as well.
So, and I know the mechanisms behind it. It's about getting the people together. The people have together. We do live in a democracy, so it's about telling our senators and our House of Representatives that this is what we want, and if you will not, put in a bill to deschedule testosterone, then we'll put the people in office who will, and then it won't help to get a lobbying group. So one of the things my company is going to start doing here in the near future is putting $10 for every treatment, protocol that we're prescribed somebody, put it into some escrow account. And then we're going to try to get the other influencers to get their following to either donate or have other TRT clinics, $10 for every prescription towards this fund that we can now get a lobbying group for. And now we can start really influencing Congress and the House of Representatives to put in this bill. And if not, then we'll put the people in office who will. And then
let us know
how it starts.
Let us know when you do this. I'm sure people here would donate to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we could all get like an escrow account together. Like we could even use why am I having a
Rick Collins?
Rick, yeah, we can. I don't know. One of my co-defendants actually used him in his case. But we could get Rick Collins to oversee the escrow account.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we could just all lead the donations and let people know how to donate. And my company is going to donate for sure. So,
an even sillier one that should probably be addressed as well as growth hormone, right? Growth hormone technically is not even a controlled substance.
Yeah.
Jail sentence to possess.
Yeah. So you can possess it.
Works, I'm not really sure. If you possess without a valid prescription, it's a 5-year jail sentence. If you write a prescription for it without a valid reason, it's a 10-year jail sentence, but it's not controlled.
It's crazy, right? I don't know.
I think you and I can do more stuff, I think, on this topic though, to kind of make people more aware.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, I mean, I think this was great, and I would definitely love to do more videos with you, and we can.
I would love that. We can start defining topics to kind of do deep dives in. I would love
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
I think it's important for people to know a lot of the intricate mechanisms.
Yeah, we can do any of that stuff too. I need to redo a lot of the compound stuff. We could do any of that stuff together.
Yeah.
You can be cool.
That would be great.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on, Ryan. It's great seeing you and talking to you.
Yeah.
I'll put all your stuff down below. You have a book that's on Amazon that you can buy. It's not done, but you can buy chapters of it now.
Yeah.
Do you have a website, or your YouTube channel will link down below?
Yep, hormonesforme.com. I will. Yep, I'll get it for you so you can look it before.
I'll have everything down below for you. And your clinic, people are looking for an HRT clinic.
Yeah. Yep, the hormonesforme.com is that clinic.
Yep, that's right.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ryan.
Yeah, it's been really great. Again, it's been an honor to talk to you. I really appreciate it. There's somebody who has so much knowledge of the technical aspect of this. It's really great to talk to you. So thank you.
Thanks. Take care.
You too.